Now what will it be? Death or exile?
I used to think that my life was a tragedy. But now I realize it's a comedy.
If you just
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Film Exiles podcast, and we have a very special episode for you guys today. It's a review of Joker from one of our correspondents at the Toronto Film Festival. So, without further ado, my name is Lupe, and I'm glad to welcome Paul to the podcast. Hey, Paul, say hello to the people.
Hi, Lupe. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome. So, Paul, you are one of the luckiest people on the planet who got to see Joker a whole fortnight before it launches wide. Tickets, I heard, were very difficult to get for the film. How was that experience for you getting tickets?
I was lucky enough to have a colleague that had a connection that was able to get us a couple of tickets on fairly short notice, and I think because we tried to hit the Tuesday matinee, it probably helped our odds a little, and we were lucky enough to get in. But it was a full house, and it was a great experience. My first time at TIFF, despite living in Toronto. We're living in the Toronto area now for probably a little over 20 years or so. So it's a good excuse to finally get out.
Awesome. So, how would you describe the atmosphere in the festival, where people are having like a lot of conversations about the film, and what was the atmosphere in the theater as well?
It was definitely a full house. I think people were pretty excited about the film. Good cross section of people. I don't know how many. You could definitely tell a few people stick out as comic book movie fans, but I think it. The audience probably extends a little beyond the typical comic book audience at a film festival. But definitely, coming out, you hear a lot of conversation about the film. People sharing their thoughts on on certain scenes that might have been open to interpretation. So it was a good experience and good energy, and I think people enjoyed the show.
That's awesome. So, full disclosure, you read the script before you saw the movie. So did I. There was a bit of a script leak, and we both got to read the script, and we had some discussions about what we read. But there's this issue of, how does a script translate to a film? So, before getting into it, for anyone who's read the script or heard any issues about the script, how did that impact your viewing experience?
Well, I'm going to go with the assumption that if you've read the script, you're not too worried about spoilers. So without getting into details, I think the major spoiler is that the script is almost identical to the movie. I'd heard fairly recently that, it was an old script from April 2018. There'd been lots of changes. There's a couple of parts where you can tell they've tweaked some things, but it's almost identical in terms of what you read. So if you haven't read the script, you're debating it, and you don't want spoilers, don't read the script.
All right. Pretty cool. Would you say that getting sort of, the other elements that, can't be captured on page, so all the visuals, the sound, the editing?
Yeah. So I guess, going back to your first question about how it impacted my experience, I mean, I'm not super concerned about spoilers. I mean, I kind of went in looking at it as having read the book before seeing the movie. And In this case, because we'd seen the trailers before I read the script, when I read the script, I was able to sort of picture the movie in my head as though, I was envisioning it, like what I'd seen from the trailer. So in that, I guess in that respect, I had a pretty accurate idea in my head of what this movie was going to look like. And it was, almost exactly what I expected. And that's not a bad thing, by any means. It's just, it was almost exactly what you'd expect. If you have seen the trailers, you've heard them talk about the film and the tone they're going for, and then you read the script, it's pretty much what you'd think it is. It's but it was a great movie, and that's not to take anything away from it. I know that's not for everyone to to read the script first, but I still enjoyed it despite having read the script. I think I got a lot of that same enjoyment from the script itself, but nice to see it on screen. Cinematography was good. The score was excellent. There's I'm not an expert on on what instruments make what sounds, but there was I think it's a distinct score. It's there's a very heavy sort of tone to some elements of the score that I really enjoyed. As I say, I couldn't put my finger on what it is making that sound, but I did enjoy it definitely.
Okay, so in general, did you like the movie or didn't you? Before we get into even more specifics.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the movie. It was it's despite having a pretty good idea what it was going in, it's refreshing to see that on screen. It's refreshing to see it well received as well, because I think most of the people in our peer group are pretty tired of the jokey stuff, and the lighthearted stuff. And it's nice to get to something more serious, have it well received, and it gives you a little bit of hope that you're going to see more of that type of content. When you see it come out well, and then get a good reception.
Okay, so on that note, how would you describe the tone? So we have comedic superhero movies, kind of like Thor Ragnarok, like Deadpool. We have ones that are quite comedic, but not as comedic like Infinity War. And we have serious ones like, Batman v Superman or Man of Steel. Does this fall neatly into any of those categories, or is it its own thing?
It's its own thing for sure. It's not, like he's talked about, Phillips has talked about. It's not a comic book movie first and foremost. It's it's a drama that happens to be around a comic book character, but it's definitely its own thing. It's definitely very grounded. It's set in 1981 New York. There's no reference to superpowers of any sort. So yeah, it's its own thing, I would say, for sure.
Okay. So how would you rate or describe the performances? Obviously, we have Joaquin Phoenix, who we've heard amazing things from. Zazie Beetz is also in this. Robert De Niro is also in this as well. And then there's a host of other supporting characters like Mark Maron, who has been battling trolls on the internet for quite a while. How would you describe their performances?
Excellent. Obviously Joaquin Phoenix is, steals the show, right? He is the, he carries almost every scene. And in fact, I'm hard pressed to think of a scene where he wasn't in it. He's got a 2-hour runtime, and I honestly don't, off the top of my head, I can't think of a scene that he's not in. I'm sure there must be some, but he's on screen almost the entire time. The other characters obviously have much smaller roles, Zazie Beetz and De Niro. And I think Phillips has said this as well, that, Joaquin Phoenix is the movie. His performance is the movie from beginning to end, and he does a great job.
Okay. So how would you describe the plot or the character development, the pacing? How did Todd Phillips tell this story? Did he do a good job?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, he describes it himself as as a slow burn, which it is. And, if you've read the script, I think you have a good sense of that. I don't think it's any secret that it kind of builds from, a guy that struggles with his day-to-day life and things don't go well for him. And, it just builds and builds till, till it hits kind of a breaking point, right? And you know, and I imagine we might get into this later, but there's always that you hear that concern that they, certain people are worried that people might feel sympathy for the villain, which I think of course you do in this case. And as Phillips has said and other people have said, you feel sympathy for him until you don't. And maybe you still do. And that's, that's a valid interpretation as well. I know that scares people a little, but I think you certainly understand the character. You understand where they're coming from. I think it's done effectively. So it's definitely, I enjoyed the pacing. As I say, it's a little bit slower, but you can feel where it's going. It builds to something that's, satisfying, and it's a good movie. It's powerful. It's just well written, well acted.
Okay.
Nothing really to add to that, really. Yeah.
So that's a good segue into some of the criticisms we've heard about the film. Now, it's quite interesting that this film has gotten near unanimous praise. People who love the film absolutely love it. I've seen, ratings calling it the movie of the year, 10 out of 10, 5 stars, 4 stars, that sort of almost hyperbolic near unanimous praise. But the people who are critics of it, I'd call them a vocal minority, claim that because it's about a loner guy who resolves his issues with violence, it could be a dangerous movie, or, people could feel sympathetic towards that. It could inspire violence, that sort of thing. In your viewing experience, I mean, what do you have to say to those criticisms? Are they valid or not?
Well, I guess it really depends on whether or not you think that these type of things can inspire violence. And coming out of it myself, I don't think it holds any validity for me personally. I think if you're, maybe if you're prone to that already, you might find it inspiring in that sense. But I think it's just a good story. It's a work of fiction. It makes a somewhat sympathetic character who, certainly a character you can understand where they're coming from, even if you don't agree with their actions. But at the end of the day, it's a piece of fiction. So I don't think that that's a valid criticism for the vast majority of the population. And I think if someone is inspired or influenced, towards that type of action, then it's probably, probably representative of an issue being there already. That's something that's not caused by the film, right? So I don't think that that's really a valid criticism.
Yeah, a lot of studies have been done about violence in media, whether it's novels or video games or music. There was a big, thing in the 80s about rock music and satanic lyrics, and studies have been done over and over again, and people have, raised the issue over and over again. And it's been shown that, these things do not influence people to commit violence. If it does, there was already an issue there in the first place. So I think it's much to do about nothing, but it's interesting to hear it from your perspective.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree in this case. It's a lot of, a lot of hyperbole, and as I say, as much as I've been complimentary of the film and I did enjoy it, there is a lot of hyperbole. Like is it the movie of the year? I guess it depends if it's your kind of movie, right? There's a matter of personal taste to it. It's a good movie, undoubtedly. It's a great acting performance. As I say, it's well scripted, it's well acted, it's well paced. But if it's not your subject matter, then you're probably not going to think it's the greatest thing in the world either, right? It's not life changing. It's not. It's really, as I say, it's not anything you wouldn't expect based on what you've seen in the trailers and what you've heard about the movie. So if that interests you, it's well done, and I think you'll like it. If that doesn't interest you, then you're probably not going to like it. It's neither something to be afraid of nor the greatest thing you've ever seen, right?
Wow. All right. So on that note, a lot of people obviously would want to compare this to Christopher Nolan's, serious, grounded, gritty take on DC mythology. So in your opinion, are you would you compare them in any way? Is Heath Ledger's Joker better or not? Are they just completely different and people shouldn't worry about that? What's your take on where this ranks?
It's hard to say. They're definitely different. I think there's definitely some points of comparison you could make, but it's two different takes on the same character. There's obviously going to be some overlap. I think they both did really well. I don't know what's really to be gained from, trying to rank them. I think they're both great performances. Whether you like a movie like this or The Dark Knight better, again, comes down to personal preference. I would say this is more grounded, arguably better acted, but again, it comes back to personal taste. Like, do you like a little Batman in your Joker movie, right? And for me, from a personal preference standpoint, I probably like Dark Knight better. That's not to say Dark Knight is, you can't really say it's objectively a better movie. And I don't, with movies in general, I wouldn't try to get into that sort of type of measurement. But again, it's personal preference. You could maybe look at this and say this maybe has more artistic merit in some ways, maybe not. But personal preference. I like a little more action. But that's, again, not to take anything away from this movie. This is it's a great movie. It's well done. It's a different thing though. And, done on a much smaller budget as well. And, it's more character focused. So, if that's what you're looking for, then I think you're going to really like it.
Okay. So, on that note, we've talked about Christopher Nolan. What do you think about the job that Todd Phillips has done? Because he's better known for his comedies. Obviously, he did the Hangover movies. He did things like, Road Trip, Due Date, Old School. He also did War Dogs, a film which I champion. It's quite a dramatic movie with some comedic elements to it, but he's really well known for his comedy movies. So how did this film, its construction, its execution, all of that, coming from that director, how did that affect you, and what do you think of that?
Well, when you listen to his filmography, you would never expect a movie like this. There's very little comedy in this, and I like that personally. Like maybe it's my conditioning and my personal viewing experience, but when I hear the audience laugh at a comic book movie now, I literally cringe. I just
Same here.
It takes me right out of the movie. And there was about 3 points in this film where the audience laughed out loud, maybe 4. And I would say none of those scenes were laugh out loud funny. They were awkward, uncomfortable laughs with a bit of a dark edge to the humor, but certainly not the kind of humor that would cause you to laugh out loud unless you're either conditioned to laugh out loud or you're just very uncomfortable. And, it's a sort of an uncomfortable, awkward laugh. So I thought this was well done. As I say, it's very surprising to me when you look at his filmography. Now, I haven't seen everything on his filmography. I've only seen the more comedic, some of the more popular comedic ones. But it's certainly not in keeping with those, I wouldn't say. Now, I haven't seen War Dogs, so I'll preface my response with that. But it was impressive. It was dark. It was serious. It was grounded in, as he stated, I'm sure you guys are aware, he hasn't tried to label this as any sort of real or specific mental illness. It's just sort of a vague and general mental illness, but it feels like a much more grounded take, and he's not making light of it. When there is humor in it, it's as I say, it's dark with an edge to it, and it's not necessarily lighthearted fun,
Okay. So just one more question about Todd Phillips. How can you speak to sort of the craftsmanship that he's shown in this movie? Because I personally have always regarded him as an auteur director, as someone with, a very high level of craft, because I feel like even in the Hangover movies, if you watch it with a critical eye, there's sort of a different style of writing, a different tone. There's a high level of quality to the cinematography and the editing. So I've always regarded him in high demand, although he's done comedies which are, not looked upon as highly as, quote unquote prestige films. So what do you think about the craftiness of this film, since it's, already started winning awards? It won the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's well put together. As I say, like, I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a cinephile by any means, so I don't know that I can necessarily evaluate it on, on all the criteria that some of the more trained eye would. But and as I say, in terms of scripting, acting, pacing, cinematography, score, it all worked well together. It for a 2-hour movie, I thought it, despite being a slow burn, that it flew by pretty quickly. There was very little I would change. I would say there was a couple of scenes that were altered from the script where I think I actually preferred the script. There's a couple of scenes that are tweaked, and I don't necessarily think for the better, but I have a suspicion as to why they might have been tweaked. So, but other than that, I think it was a great piece of work. Now, I've not actually looked at The Hangover or Old School with a critical eye. So to maybe go back now and look at those movies, having seen the Jokers, having seen what he's capable of, and saying, do I see some of those same elements in those films? Maybe I could do that now, but certainly when I watched those, I wasn't looking at those movies from that perspective. So it's hard to compare to his previous works, but I was certainly impressed by this, by what he's done with this movie.
Okay. So, wow. That was a really good discussion. You've made me even more excited to see this film. I didn't doubt that a lot of people who I consider to have good taste would like this movie, but I'm excited to see it for myself. I'm going to have, my own opinion about it. So are there any, last thoughts you have? Any last things you want to say about the movie? Do you want to give it a grade or rank it, or?
Yeah, it's hard to grade. It's on a letter grade, it's certainly an A movie. It's numerical. It's a solid 8.5 to 9.5 kind of movie. Again, this personal preference is gonna sort of determine where it falls for you, but. It's really good. I'd recommend it. As I say, though, what you hear on all these reviews is very, very hyperbolic. And I think if you go in with a more even keeled mindset, I think you're probably going to have a better experience. If you're going in expecting to see something that's never been done before and to be blown away with something, you might be disappointed, because it's, as I say, it's. There's not a ton of secrets in this movie. You get a very good sense from the trailers as to what it is and from what they've said. But it's a great movie. It's definitely worth watching. Certainly the kind of movie I'd want to see more of. So overall, I think it's great. I think I'd recommend watching it. Give it a chance. Just don't go in with your expectations so high that you can't help but be disappointed. And I think you'll come out very pleasantly satisfied with the movie.
All right. It's pretty good advice. Thank you very much, Paul. We really appreciate your time, and we appreciate the discussion. Can you let people know where they can find you on Twitter if they want to follow up with some discussion with you about the film or films in general?
Yep. I'm at _Paul_P on Twitter. So yeah, by all means, shoot me a message if you want to discuss. Thank you for having me on the show, guys. It's been fun, and look forward to hearing your thoughts on it once you get a chance to see it as well.
Absolutely, without a doubt. You can't shut me up. So I've been yours truly, Lupe. You can find me on Twitter at LiveLoveLupe. And till the next time, cheers, guys.
Send in the clown.